My name is Emma, I am 32 years old, and I never imagined my career would collapse in less than 10 minutes. The morning started like any other. I grabbed a cup of coffee, straightened my blazer, and prepared to dive into another long day at Harbor Point Communications. By 9 o'clock, I was sitting across from Victoria, my boss in her oversized office, lined with polished wood and the faint smell of expensive perfume. She looked at me as if I had committed a crime. Her words sliced through the air like glass. "This company gave you everything, Emma, and you betrayed us. I know you interviewed with North Bay last Thursday." My heart thudded so hard I thought the guard outside might hear it. I opened my mouth to explain, but she raised her manicured hand, silencing me. On the desk lay a printed email evidence of my so-called treason. She said security would escort me to my desk. My email had already been shut off. My access card was dead. Just like that, 6 years of my life were being erased. I sat frozen, my hands wrapped so tightly around my purse that the leather creaked. The humiliation was suffocating, yet what cut deepest was not the sudden firing, but the coldness in her tone, as if I were disposable like a broken stapler tossed into the trash. For a moment, I thought about fighting back. I thought about shouting, about listing every contract I had saved, every dollar I had brought in. Instead, I stood up. My voice came out steady, almost detached. "I understand. I wish you and the company continued success." Her face flickered with confusion. She had expected tears, begging perhaps even a scene. Instead, I extended my hand. She shook it, her grip limp, her eyes narrowing, as if she couldn't quite decide whether she had just won or lost. Outside her office, the security guard hovered as though he were waiting to cuff me. I packed my desk, slowly sliding framed photos, sticky notes, and the little desk plant I had nurtured for years into a cardboard box. Co-workers glanced my way with wide eyes, some offering sympathetic smiles, others too afraid to look for more than a second. I smiled back, calm, almost serene. I would not give Victoria the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. When the glass doors of Harbor Point closed behind me, the sunlight struck my face like a spotlight. For the first time in years, I felt the air fill my lungs without the weight of someone else's control pressing down on me. Victoria believed she had destroyed me. She believed this was the punishment I deserved for daring to seek more. But in that moment, standing on the sidewalk with 6 years of my life condensed into a cardboard box, I knew something she did not. This was not an ending. This was the beginning. I walked away from the building, clutching the cardboard box against my chest. Every step echoed with a strange mix of shame and liberation. Behind me, Harbor Point's glass tower gleamed in the morning light, cold and indifferent, while inside I knew people were whispering about me. Fired. Escorted out by security, labeled disloyal. But I refused to let my story end with humiliation. The guard had hovered as though I might bolt. My coworkers' faces had carried pity, confusion, maybe even fear, because if it could happen to me, it could happen to anyone. That thought stayed with me as I crossed the parking lot. How easily years of loyalty could be erased by a single accusation. I slid the box into the trunk of my car and closed it gently, as if the contents deserved more dignity than my exit had. Then I sat behind the wheel and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. The calm mask I had worn finally cracked. A rush of anger, sorrow, and disbelief swirled inside me. How could Victoria look me in the eye and act as if 6 years meant nothing? I had poured my heart into that company. Nights at the office, weekends, checking campaigns, endless client dinners, all so Harbor Point could grow. I had believed that loyalty mattered, that hard work would eventually be rewarded. Instead, I had been tossed aside, like yesterday's paper. The humiliation stung. Being walked out by security made me feel like a criminal. But beneath that sting, another sensation grew resolve. As the engine hummed, I took a deep breath. I was free. Yes, the blow hurt. Yes, my chest still burned with injustice. But the shackles of waiting for someone else's approval had been cut. I reached for my phone, and as if the universe wanted to confirm my thoughts, a message flashed across the screen. "Can we move our final discussion to 2 o'clock today?" It was from David, the CEO of North Bay. My lips curved into a small smile. The same company Victoria thought I had betrayed her with was already reaching for me. She believed firing me would cripple me. Instead, it might be the very thing that set me free. Still driving home felt surreal. The box rattled in the trunk. Inside were years of tiny artifacts, photos, trinkets, pens. My life reduced to cardboard. By the time I reached my kitchen, the weight of it all pressed hard on my chest again. I placed the box on the counter and stared at it. This was no longer just a day off. I was unemployed. The reality hit me like a wave. Unemployed, a word I had never associated with myself. The air in my lungs grew heavy until I forced myself to breathe slowly. Then the phone rang again. Olivia, my best friend. I just heard she blurted out. Thomas texted me. Are you okay? I pressed my fingers to my temple. I'm processing. It happened so fast. Her voice sharpened. It's unfair, Emma. Everyone knows you were the reason North Bay stayed with Harbor Point. Victoria is intimidated by you. She always has been. Her words settled deep inside me. I had known the truth, but hearing someone else say it gave it power. Victoria wasn't protecting the company. She was protecting her ego. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Olivia's anger gave me strength. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't weak. I had been undervalued for far too long. The thought struck me again, this wasn't punishment. This was release. And maybe it was the best thing that could have happened to me. Before I go further, let me ask you something. Have you ever faced a moment like this, where years of loyalty were repaid with betrayal? If you have, tell me in the comments. I want to know your story. And if you're here for these real raw journeys, don't forget to hit subscribe, so you can walk with me through every twist. Because trust me, this story is only just beginning. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Sunlight crept through my blinds, painting lines across the wall, but instead of rushing into another day of endless reports, I sat still. For the first time in 6 years, I had nowhere to be at 8 o'clock. No buzzing phone filled with client demands. No calendar screaming with back-to-back meetings. Just silence. But silence can be brutal. It left space for memory. 6 years. I whispered the number aloud, almost tasting the bitterness on my tongue. 6 years of loyalty. 6 years of giving more than anyone else. 6 years of proving my worth to a company that never once returned the gesture. I thought back to my first raise request. I had walked into Victoria's office armed with data. Client revenue tripled under my management. My campaigns were pulling industry awards. I had prepared slides, charts, everything she could possibly ask for. She listened, nodding with that same rehearsed look of regret I had come to despise. It's just not in the budget this year, Emma. But your contribution is noted. I believed her. The economy was shaky, so I swallowed my disappointment and returned to work. I told myself the next year would be different. The next year came. I had landed 3 new major clients. I had won another award. I asked again, confident that she would finally see reason. Next year will be better, she promised. We just need to tighten our belts a little longer. Tighten our belts. Those words still sting. Because the very same week, Victoria rolled into the parking lot in a brand new luxury SUV. The company signed a lease on another floor in the building. Everyone could see the expansion, the growth. The only thing shrinking was my patience. By the third time 6 months ago, I had already begun to lose hope. I had just secured a 40% increase in North Bay's annual contract, an achievement that should have cemented my value. Instead, she smiled that same insincere smile. Your performance is exceptional. But this year, we're investing in infrastructure. Let's revisit in the summer. Something in me broke that day. I went home, sat at my desk, and updated my resume for the first time since graduate school. It wasn't rage that drove me, it was self-respect. I finally admitted what I had refused to say. For years, they would never see me. That's why North Bay mattered. It wasn't just another opportunity. It was validation that my skills had value outside the walls of Harbor Point. As I made breakfast that morning, those memories spun in my head, painful but clarifying. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't demanding. I had been strung along year after year because it was convenient for them to keep me underpaid and overworked. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and asked myself a hard question. Had I stayed too long out of fear, out of loyalty, out of hope that maybe, just maybe, things would change? And I think this is where many of us falter. We wait. We believe next year will be better, even when all evidence says otherwise. We give our energy, our health, our time, hoping someone else will finally value us the way we deserve. So let me turn this to you. Have you ever been strung along with empty promises, told to wait, to be patient, only to realize nothing would change? If so, I want to hear it. Share your story in the comments because these are the conversations that need to happen. By the time I rinsed my coffee cup, my phone buzzed with another reminder of what lay ahead. A meeting with North Bay at 2 o'clock. Not just a meeting, my chance to step into a new life. And as I slipped into my navy suit, the one I usually reserved for client pitches, I whispered to myself, they thought they could break me, but I'm still here, and I'm not done yet. By the time I stepped out of my apartment that afternoon, the air felt different, lighter, almost defiant. Yet the bitterness of those memories lingered, fueling every step I took. It was impossible not to replay the contradictions, the hypocrisy that had defined my years at Harbor Point. 3 times I had been denied a raise. 3 times I had been told to wait, to trust that loyalty would be rewarded. And all 3 times, Victoria's actions told me the truth, that my loyalty was nothing more than a leash they used to keep me in place. I remember sitting in the crowded conference room during a quarterly meeting. Victoria's voice rang through the speakers announcing record profits. People clapped, some even cheered. I sat there smiling faintly while inside I felt my chest tighten. Those profits had my fingerprints all over them. I had built relationships, salvaged contracts, and created campaigns that brought those numbers to life. Yet when it came time to recognize me, she looked me in the eye and said, "Not this year." The injustice was sharp, like being asked to build a mansion brick by brick and then told you weren't worthy of even sleeping in the guest room. And the image of her pulling into the parking lot in that luxury SUV, it burned. She parked it right where everyone could see. The leather seats probably cost more than my entire annual bonus. That was the year she told me we had to tighten our belts. I would sit at my desk long after everyone left. I remember the hum of the vending machine, the click of my keyboard echoing in the near-empty office. I told myself this was the sacrifice successful people made, that one day it would pay off. I swallowed the exhaustion, the skipped dinners, the missed birthdays, because I believed dedication meant something. But the truth was, dedication without recognition is exploitation. I see that clearly now. At the time, though, I couldn't admit it. I clung to the belief that the next presentation, the next campaign, the next big client would finally be the one that broke the cycle. I kept chasing an approval that was never coming. The cruelest part was how calculated it all felt. Victoria never shouted. She never demeaned me outright. Instead, she cloaked her denials in polished language delivered with sympathy. Not in the budget. Tighten our belts. Maybe next summer. Words designed to pacify me, to keep me working harder, longer, all while she enjoyed the rewards. Looking back, I wonder how many others she had trapped in the same cycle. How many had gone home night after night wondering if their value was invisible, when in truth it was deliberately ignored. As I drove downtown toward North Bay's gleaming headquarters, those memories sharpened into resolve. I realized something crucial: injustice doesn't always come in loud betrayals. Sometimes it comes in quiet denials, repeated until you doubt yourself. And maybe that's what made being fired so strangely liberating. It stripped away the illusion. It forced me to confront the truth I had been too afraid to face. They were never going to give me what I deserved. The skyscrapers of Spokane rose in the distance glass, catching the sunlight. My heart pounded as I parked and stared up at North Bay's building. This wasn't just another office. It was proof that there were places where my worth might actually be seen. I took one last look at the Harbor Point box sitting in my back seat. Inside were the remnants of years I couldn't get back. But as I straightened my blazer and grabbed my purse, I whispered to myself, that chapter is over. This one starts now. And with that, I stepped onto the sidewalk, ready to face the unknown. So, the lobby of North Bay's headquarters was everything Harbor Point was not. bright, modern, filled with energy. The glass walls stretched up 3 stories, catching the sunlight and throwing it across the polished marble floors. I stood there for a moment, taking it all in, almost forgetting the humiliation of that morning. But humiliation has a way of seeping back in. As I walked to the reception desk, I thought about the cardboard box still sitting in my back seat. 6 years of my life shoved into a flimsy container. It was absurd, really. How something so small could hold so much. The receptionist smiled warmly and offered me water while I waited. That alone felt like a contrast to Harbor Point, where receptionists were trained to treat even employees like interruptions. It struck me how different the culture felt even in these first few minutes. When David appeared, he greeted me with a firm handshake. His eyes held no judgment, no suspicion, just respect. That one gesture eased some of the knots twisting in my stomach. We walked through the open floor plan employees, nodding and smiling as we passed. Some I recognized from client meetings, others I didn't. But each face carried something I hadn't seen in Harbor Point for a long time, pride in where they worked. Inside David's office, the conversation turned quickly to what had happened. He leaned back in his chair, hands folded, and told me something I wasn't expecting. "Victoria called me this morning," he said. "She told me you'd been removed from the account, and that she would personally oversee it." My chest tightened. Of course she had. Victoria couldn't resist the chance to grab the biggest client for herself. But then David's expression softened. "What she doesn't know," he continued, "is that our board has been concerned about Harbor Point for months. Delays, miscommunication, and frankly, the only reason we stayed was you." The words hit me with a force I can't describe. All those late nights, all the times I felt invisible, they hadn't been wasted. Someone had seen, someone who mattered. He slid a folder across the desk. "This isn't an interview, Emma. It's a job offer." I opened it and my breath caught. Director of Client Strategy. A salary nearly double what I had fought 3 years to earn at Harbor Point. Benefits, resources, leadership responsibilities. It wasn't just validation, it was freedom. For a moment I couldn't speak. My throat closed up and my eyes burned. After everything Victoria had done to minimize me, to keep me small, here was the universe handing me proof that I had always been more. I looked up, my voice quiet but firm. "This is more than I imagined." David smiled. "No, it's exactly what you've earned." That night I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the signed offer letter. My phone buzzed with texts from old coworkers. Some whispered rumors of Victoria pacing her office frantic. Others admitted they were brushing off their resumes. The empire she thought she ruled was starting to tremble. But I didn't reply to most of them. Not yet. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about me stepping into something new, something better. I leaned back, exhaling deeply. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I was rising. And right here, let me pause. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever felt trapped under a boss who refused to see your worth, know this: you are not alone. Share your story in the comments. And if you believe in reclaiming your power, hit subscribe. Because together, we're building a space where loyalty and dignity still matter. As I folded the letter back into the folder, I realized one simple truth: Victoria thought she had ended my career. But really, she had just set the stage for my beginning. Mike, the following morning my phone rang before I even had time to sip my first cup of coffee. Olivia's name lit up the screen, and I knew she wouldn't hold back. Emma, I heard everything she said without pause. Her voice was sharp, filled with the kind of anger only a best friend can carry on your behalf. "Thomas told me about the way they marched you out like some kind of criminal. Are you okay?" I pressed the mug against my lips, letting the heat anchor me. "I'm still processing," I admitted. It was humiliating, Liv. One moment I was preparing client notes, and the next security was hovering at my desk like I'd stolen company secrets. "It's disgusting," she snapped. "Everyone knows you're the reason North Bay stayed with Harbor Point this long. Without you, they would have walked years ago. Victoria couldn't stand that. She fired you because she was threatened, not because you did anything wrong." Her words hit me like a sudden gust of wind, hard, clarifying. I had suspected it, of course. I had felt the sting of Victoria's constant intrusions into my meetings, the way she would insert herself into conversations with North Bay, as though my success somehow needed to be diluted by her presence. But hearing Olivia say it out loud stripped away the last of my doubts. She's jealous, Olivia continued, her voice rising, and insecure. You were everything she wanted to be: respected, trusted, indispensable. And instead of supporting you, she tore you down. I leaned back against the counter, staring at the cardboard box still sitting there, unopened. Family photos peeking out between stacks of files, little souvenirs from client events, the pens I had stolen from countless trade shows. My career had been reduced to fragments, but Olivia's fire reminded me those fragments were evidence of a legacy Victoria couldn't erase. You know what the worst part is, I said quietly. She made me feel like I had committed treason, as if looking for an opportunity after being denied 3 raises was betrayal. She twisted my loyalty into a weapon against me. Loyalty works both ways, Olivia shot back. And they never gave it back to you. Don't forget that. This isn't your failure. This is their loss. Her certainty steadied me. For years I had clung to the hope that one day Harbor Point would recognize my worth. I had convinced myself that patience was virtue, that endurance was strength. But what if patience had been my prison? What if I had allowed myself to be undervalued because I was too afraid to demand better? The thought stung, but it was also liberating, because now with Harbor Point behind me, I no longer had to wait. North Bay called yesterday, I said, almost whispering. They want me to come in this afternoon. Olivia gasped, then laughed a bright, fierce sound. See, do you hear yourself? You didn't lose, Emma. You won. The best client you ever managed wants you. Not Harbor Point, not Victoria, you. Her words washed over me like sunlight after a storm. Maybe she was right. Maybe being escorted out with that box wasn't the end of my story. It was the proof that my story mattered enough to continue elsewhere. Promise me something, Olivia said after a pause. Promise me you won't let them crawl back to you with some fake apology and shiny offer. They don't deserve you. Don't let them make you doubt yourself again. I smiled a small, steady smile. I promise. We ended the call, and for a moment, I stood there in the quiet, listening to my own breathing. Olivia's faith in me had sparked something inside. A truth I could no longer deny. I had been the backbone, the reason Harbor Point thrived, and Victoria had cut me loose. Not because I was weak, but because I was too strong for her to control. As the clock ticked closer to 2 o'clock, I grabbed my suit jacket and keys. My future wasn't waiting inside that box on the counter. My future was waiting in a glass tower downtown with people who actually saw me. And this time I would walk in, not as a desperate employee begging for scraps, but as a woman who finally knew her worth. The elevator ride to the 30th floor of North Bay's headquarters felt like a climb out of the shadows and into the light. I smoothed my blazer rehearsing lines in my head, but truthfully nothing could prepare me for what was about to unfold. The glass doors opened to a reception area, buzzing with quiet confidence. David, the CEO, was already waiting, hand extended, his smile, calm but genuine. Emma, thank you for coming on such short notice, he said. His tone carried warmth so different from the icy authority I had endured at Harbor Point. We walked past open workspaces, collaborative pods filled with employees exchanging ideas. They looked energized, alive, proud of where they worked. It was a jarring contrast to the drained faces at Harbor Point, where every conversation seemed weighed down by fear of management's disapproval. Inside his office, David poured coffee himself, not delegating the task to an assistant, and motioned for me to sit. Then, with no preamble, he said the words that still echo in my mind. I received a call from Victoria this morning. She told me you'd been removed from the North Bay account, and that she would personally handle our business until they found your replacement. I froze, keeping my expression neutral, even as anger flickered in my chest. Of course she would. Victoria wasn't just trying to discard me, she was trying to erase me. But what she doesn't know, David continued, leaning forward, is that we've been concerned about Harbor Point for months. Delayed responses, declining quality. With you, we had excellence. Without you, we had doubts. The only reason we stayed this long was because of you. I couldn't breathe for a second. 6 years of struggle, of denial, of humiliation validated in one sentence. It wasn't Harbor Point that had earned North Bay's trust. It was me. Then came the twist. He slid a folder across the desk. This isn't an interview, Emma. It's a job offer. Director of Client Strategy. My hands trembled as I opened it. A salary nearly double what I had begged for 3 times at Harbor Point. Benefits I had only dreamed of. A leadership role that would put me in charge of an entire team, not just a portfolio. "This is generous," I whispered. David shook his head. "No. This is market rate. This is what you should have had all along." The words nearly undid me. For 3 years, Victoria had told me to be patient, to tighten my belt, to wait until next summer. Now, in one folder was proof that every one of those denials had been nothing but manipulation. I left North Bay that afternoon with a signed letter tucked carefully into my bag, my steps lighter than they had been in years. And as I walked through the downtown streets, I felt something else, anger slowly turning into resolve. Because here's the thing, injustice doesn't just hurt. It shapes us. It forces us to decide who we are when people try to diminish us. And that's where I want to pause and ask you, have you ever had someone try to erase your contributions to make you feel replaceable when deep down you knew you were the backbone? What did you do in that moment? Share it in the comments, because I think stories like these deserve to be told. Victoria thought she had clipped my wings by firing me. She thought she had written the end of my story. But as I folded that offer letter, I realized she had only written the beginning of the next chapter. The irony was sharp. The very company she had accused me of betraying had just placed me in a position of power far greater than anything she had ever given me. And I couldn't help but wonder if this was just the start. What would happen when the full weight of her decision came crashing down on Harbor Point? Like when I left North Bay that afternoon, the folder with my new future pressed against my side, memories began to surface. They came uninvited, vivid, like fragments of an old film reel I couldn't turn off. I remembered the very first day I walked into Harbor Point Communications. I was fresh out of graduate school, clutching a marketing degree from Washington State University, like it was my ticket to the world. My heels clicked nervously on the tile floors as I carried coffee for meetings and stacked folders on desks that weren't mine. No one knew my name. I was the girl who took notes, the one who stayed quiet in the back corner of the conference room. But I worked, harder than anyone else. I volunteered for projects nobody wanted. I stayed late when others rushed home. I listened to clients others dismissed as too demanding, too complicated, too much trouble. Slowly, I turned those same clients into loyal accounts. By the end of my second year, I wasn't just a note-taker anymore. I was managing mid-tier accounts, names that mattered, businesses with serious revenue. My phone buzzed constantly, not because people needed a scapegoat, but because they trusted me to fix problems. Then came the crisis that changed everything. North Bay Solutions was on the brink of walking away. Their previous representative had dropped the ball, leaving a multi-million-dollar contract dangling by a thread. No one wanted to touch it. Too risky, too political. But I stepped in. I spent nights combing through reports, redesigning campaign strategies, anticipating needs before they were even spoken. I remember sitting across from David in that tense meeting, my hands shaking under the table, and telling him exactly how we could repair the relationship. When the campaign launched, not only did it succeed, it exceeded projections. From that moment, North Bay didn't just stay, they expanded. They doubled their budget with Harbor Point, and David personally requested me as their account manager. For a brief period, I thought this was the breakthrough. I thought the recognition would follow, that Victoria would see me as the asset I had proven myself to be. And in a way she did. She smiled, congratulated me, even praised my initiative in front of the team. But praise never turned into pay. Compliments never turned into raises. I was applauded at meetings, but denied behind closed doors. And each year the gap between what I gave and what I received grew wider. Still I stayed. I told myself loyalty mattered. That if I just kept working harder, if I just kept delivering results, eventually they would have no choice but to reward me. But the truth is, I wasn't staying for Victoria. I was staying for the clients, for the people who trusted me. People like David, people like the North Bay board who saw my worth even when my own company did not. Driving home from North Bay that evening, the city lights flickering against my windshield, I realized how deeply those years had shaped me. I had been underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed, but I had also built something undeniable, a reputation. A track record no one could erase, not even Victoria. The cardboard box sitting in my trunk no longer felt like an ending. It felt like proof. Proof that I had survived long enough to outgrow the place that once defined me. And maybe that's the part no one tells you. Sometimes the hardest climbs, the ones that scrape your hands and break your sleep, are the very climbs that prepare you to fly higher than you ever imagined. That night, as I set the signed offer letter on my kitchen counter, I caught my reflection in the window. The woman staring back wasn't the intern with shaking hands, or the mid-level manager begging for recognition. She was someone who had fought for every inch and finally claimed her ground. And deep down I knew this Harbor Point had been my training ground. But North Bay? North Bay was going to be my stage. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual, my mind buzzing with everything that had happened. The folder with my offer letter sat neatly on the kitchen counter, almost glowing in the dim light. I ran my hand over it as if to make sure it was real. Director of Client Strategy. A salary nearly double what I had begged for at Harbor Point. A team to lead. A chance to finally build something where my worth wasn't questioned. But beneath the excitement, I felt another pulse. A sharp awareness of what this meant for Victoria and Harbor Point. She thought she had punished me, humiliated me, ended me. Yet in less than 24 hours, I had risen higher than she ever allowed me to dream. When I stepped into North Bay's building later that morning, David was waiting again. His handshake was steady, his words calm. "We don't need to drag this out, Emma. You've proven yourself for years. Now you'll do it here on our side." I couldn't help the small laugh that escaped me. How ironic that the company Victoria had accused me of betraying was the very company elevating me. As the day unfolded, I met the team. I would lead 5 sharp, energetic specialists who already knew my work. They welcomed me not as an outsider, but as someone they had long respected. One of them even said quietly, "We've all hoped this would happen." That struck me. They had hoped for me. In 6 years at Harbor Point, no one had ever said that. Still, I couldn't stop my mind from drifting back. What was happening inside Harbor Point right now? My phone buzzed throughout the afternoon with texts from former colleagues. Jessica, the receptionist, messaged, "She's been locked in her office all day. Looks rattled." Thomas added, "Emergency meeting. She told everyone you were terminated for disloyalty, that Harbor Point values loyalty above all." I almost laughed at the irony. Loyalty. The word they wielded like a weapon. Loyalty that meant giving everything and receiving nothing. But here's the thing, I didn't want to obsess over Harbor Point anymore. I didn't want revenge to consume me. What I wanted was to build, to grow, to prove to myself that I had always been more than they allowed me to be. Still, part of me couldn't deny the satisfaction. Victoria thought she had slammed the door. Instead, she had opened the window I never dared to climb through. That evening, as I reviewed onboarding documents, I thought about the journey ahead. There would be challenges, adjustments, maybe even doubt. But one thing was certain, I would never again wait 3 years for recognition that might never come. And that brings me to you. Have you ever been told to wait, to be patient, while watching others reap the rewards of your labor? Have you ever wondered if leaving was the only way to reclaim your dignity? If so, let me know in the comments. Because those stories matter. They remind us we're not alone in these battles. I closed my laptop and stared out at the city lights. Somewhere across town, Victoria was scrambling, trying to patch the hole she had ripped in her own company. She thought firing me would be her victory, but she had no idea what was coming next. Because the truth was, Harbor Point hadn't just lost me. They were on the verge of losing far more. And soon the fallout would be impossible for her to escape. By the end of that week, Harbor Point was unraveling. Word spread quickly in corporate circles, and the whispers reached me long before any official statement did. Colleagues sent me fragments of gossip like puzzle pieces, Victoria pacing the hallways, managers summoned to emergency meetings, clients raising questions she couldn't answer. It was surreal watching the empire I had helped build wobble on unsteady legs the moment I stepped away. One evening Thomas called. His voice was low, cautious, as if he were afraid someone might overhear. "Emma, she told everyone you were terminated for disloyalty. She used you as an example. Said Harbor Point rewards loyalty above all else." I let out a dry laugh. Loyalty. That's what she's calling it now. "It backfired," Thomas admitted. "People aren't buying it. They saw what you did for this place. Some are already brushing up their resumes." That thought both saddened and vindicated me. I had always known the culture was fragile, but I hadn't realized how much my quiet persistence had kept people steady. Now, without me, the cracks were widening. Meanwhile, at North Bay, things were moving in the opposite direction. David and his executive team welcomed me like I had always belonged. Meetings felt collaborative, not combative. Ideas were debated, not dismissed. And when I spoke, people listened, really listened. That shift alone was enough to make me realize just how starved I had been at Harbor Point. Still, the most satisfying moment came during a strategy session when David turned to me and said, "Emma, you understand this better than anyone. What's your recommendation?" It wasn't just a question, it was recognition. It was validation that my voice carried weight. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I thought about the strange irony of it all. Victoria had feared my value so much that she tried to strip it away. But by doing so, she had delivered me straight into a role where that value was undeniable. I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped out onto my balcony. The city stretched before me, glowing with possibility. Harbor Point felt like another lifetime, a place I had outgrown but clung to for too long. It made me wonder, why do so many of us stay in places that don't see us? Is it fear, habit, hope? I had stayed 3 years longer than I should have, hoping loyalty would finally be enough. And that makes me curious. Have you ever stayed in a job or even a relationship long after you knew it was no longer right for you? What kept you there? Was it fear of the unknown or hope that things might change? Share it in the comments, because your story might be the reminder someone else needs to hear. The wind brushed across my face, cool and grounding. Somewhere across town, Victoria was clinging to power, scrambling to salvage contracts, terrified of losing North Bay. But the truth was, the decision was already slipping out of her hands. And I knew deep down that the day was coming when she would realize just how badly she had miscalculated. Because soon the consequences of firing me would not just be about pride, they would be about survival. The phone call came late in the evening, just as I was finishing dinner. The number was unfamiliar, but something told me to answer. "Emma Walker," the voice asked. It was female, calm, practiced. "This is Elaine Winters. I serve on the board at Harbor Point Communications." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. A board member. They rarely involved themselves in employee matters, especially not with someone who had already been discarded. "I understand there was an incident regarding your employment yesterday," Elaine continued smoothly. "I'd like to meet with you tomorrow morning. It seems Victoria may have acted hastily." For a moment, I almost laughed. Hasty. They had dragged me out like a thief, erased my access in seconds, humiliated me in front of the entire office, and now it was hasty. "I appreciate the call," I said, carefully steadying my tone, "but I've already accepted another position." There was a pause. "May I ask where? I don't think it would be appropriate to share that at this time," I replied. Her silence spoke volumes. She already suspected. And when she spoke again, her tone had shifted from polite to urgent. "If this is about compensation, Emma, the board is prepared to revisit those conversations. We value your contribution to Harbor Point." The irony nearly choked me. For 3 years, I had laid out my contributions in meticulous presentations. For 3 years, I had been told to wait, to tighten my belt, to be patient. And now suddenly, I was valued, only after they realized what they had lost. Still, something inside me whispered that this meeting might be worth attending, not to negotiate my return, but to close the chapter on my terms. The next morning, I dressed deliberately in a navy suit. Not to impress, but to remind myself and them that I wasn't walking back as a dismissed employee. I was walking in as an equal. The receptionist, Jessica, looked startled when she saw me sign the visitor log. She lowered her voice. "Everyone's talking about how wrong this was. You were the best of us." Her words warmed me more than I expected. Elaine was waiting in a conference room upstairs, silver hair cut into a precise Bob Crisp suit, every inch the board-level executive. She shook my hand firmly before opening a slim folder. "I've reviewed your personnel file," she began. 6 years of excellent performance reviews, consistent growth in your accounts, and 3 documented requests for salary adjustments, all denied. I kept my expression neutral, though inside a bitter satisfaction bloomed. At last, someone else was saying it aloud. "What I don't see," Elaine continued, "is documentation justifying your termination. There's no policy against interviewing elsewhere. Victoria used the word disloyal. An interesting choice, don't you think? I nodded once measured. Yes, very interesting. Then came the offer. Direct, unapologetic. The board would like to offer reinstatement. With the adjusted compensation, you requested last review plus a 10% increase and the title of Senior Account Director. I inhaled slowly, letting the weight of her words settle. It was everything I had asked for over the last 3 years, everything I had been denied. And yet, instead of triumph, all I felt was emptiness. That's generous, I said, choosing each word with care. But as I mentioned, I've already accepted a position elsewhere. My new role begins Monday. Elaine studied me for a moment. At North Bay Solutions, she stated, not asked. I did not confirm, but I didn't deny either. Professional boundaries mattered. Her voice softened, though urgency still pulsed beneath. Victoria is concerned that North Bay may reconsider their relationship with Harbor Point given your departure. And there it was, the real reason I had been summoned. Not out of remorse for how I'd been treated. Not out of genuine recognition of my value, but fear. Fear of losing the very client I had fought for and nurtured. That's a question for North Bay, I said carefully. Elaine leaned back, tapping her pen once against the folder. Then allow me one last question. What could Harbor Point have done differently to retain you? I hesitated, then spoke the truth I had carried for years. Recognize my value before I had to look elsewhere to find it. Loyalty works both ways. Harbor Point expected commitment, while proving again and again that I wasn't worth investing in. That imbalance was unsustainable. Elaine's expression shifted something between respect and regret. She stood offering her hand once more, a fair assessment. Thank you for your candor, Emma. Whatever your next steps, I wish you success. As I walked out of Harbor Point for the second and final time, I felt lighter than I had in years. It wasn't about the offer I had turned down. It was about reclaiming the narrative, leaving on my own terms. And for the first time, I realized closure wasn't about being asked back. It was about having the strength to say no. Like walking out of Harbor Point for the second and final time felt surreal. The polished floors, the glass doors, even the receptionist's sympathetic eyes. They all seemed smaller now, like I had outgrown the space without even realizing it. I carried no box this time, no traces of belonging. Just the steady confidence of someone who had been given the chance to speak her truth and then chose to walk away. The spring air outside was cool, almost cleansing. I paused on the sidewalk, breathing it in. For 6 years, this building had owned my mornings and my nights, but now it was just another office tower, one I had no reason to ever step into again. When I arrived home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the balcony. The city lights twinkled as if they were signaling something new, something waiting. I pulled out my phone and reread David's email, the subject line glowing like a beacon, "Welcome to the team." I leaned back, staring at the night sky. Closure had been delivered, but more than that, a truth had been carved into me. Harbor Point had only recognized my value when they feared losing me, and that was far too late. The following Monday, I walked into North Bay as Director of Client Strategy. My new office had adore windows, even a welcome basket waiting on the desk. At 9 o'clock, sharp David introduced me to the team, 5 talented specialists who would now work under my direction. Their faces were eager, their respect clear. Team David said, "This is Emma Walker. Many of you know her already, and you know the caliber of her work. We're fortunate to have her with us." Applause filled the room. It was a moment I'll never forget. For 6 years, I had been applauded only when it cost nothing, hollow words in conference rooms, empty praise that never translated into real recognition. Here it was different. Here it was paired with authority, resources, and trust. After the meeting, David asked me to join him in the executive conference room. Several members of the leadership team were waiting. I slid into a chair, nerves tingling in my chest. "We wanted your input before we finalized something important," the CFO began. "Our contract with Harbor Point is up for renewal next month. Given your experience, your knowledge of their systems, and your history with their leadership, we'd like to hear your perspective." My pulse quickened. I had expected challenges at North Bay, but not this. Not so soon. The weight of their gazes pressed on me, and I realized the irony. In less than a week, I had gone from being cast out as disloyal to being invited into the very room where Harbor Point's future would be decided. The temptation surged inside me. This was my chance to take revenge, to recommend severing ties, to deal the kind of financial blow that Victoria would never recover from. A part of me wanted to see her empire collapse under the weight of her arrogance. But another part whispered caution. Professionalism mattered. Legacy mattered. If I lashed out, I would become the very thing she accused me of being. I folded my hands on the table, my voice calm. Harbor Point has strong capabilities, but consistency is their weakness. Without proper account management, results suffer. Any evaluation should measure not just outcomes, but sustainability. The executives nodded, considering my words. I had said enough to plant the truth without weaponizing it. Still, I knew this decision would change everything. Harbor Point's survival depended on keeping North Bay. And now the choice was sitting in the very room where I held a voice. And here's where I want to bring you along with me. What would you do in my shoes? Would you strike back at the company that humiliated you? Or would you take the high road, focusing only on professionalism? Tell me in the comments, because I know many of you have faced this exact dilemma in your own way. As the meeting ended, I walked back to my new office. The skyline glowed beyond the windows, a reminder that sometimes life sets you up for moments you could never script. I didn't know yet which way the decision would fall, but I did know this. Whatever happened next, Victoria would finally face the consequences she had worked so hard to avoid. Monday afternoon, I closed my office door for the first time, sat at my new desk, and let the silence settle around me. For years, I had worked in a cramped cubicle barely wide enough for 2 chairs, while my boss flaunted her corner office. Now, sunlight spilled through wide windows and the skyline stretched out like an invitation. It wasn't just an office, it was a declaration. By midweek, my team and I were already knee-deep in projects. They brought me stacks of reports, asked for direction, and listened with a level of focus I wasn't used to. Every suggestion I made was considered tested and acted upon. It was empowering and humbling. I had never been given this much trust, not even after saving Harbor Point's largest account. On Wednesday morning, David walked in with a grin. "You're settling in well," he said. I nodded. "The team is sharp. They know what they're doing. I'm just giving them a framework." "Don't undersell yourself, Emma," he replied. "They respect you. That kind of respect can't be taught." His words lingered long after he left. Respect. At Harbor Point, I had begged for recognition, but here it was, given freely. Yet, the irony never left me. Because in less than a week, I had shifted from being escorted out by security to being applauded in executive meetings. I wasn't just working accounts anymore, I was shaping strategy. And in the background, Harbor Point was unraveling. The texts kept coming. Jessica, the receptionist, messaged. 3 more account managers are updating their resumes. The office feels empty without you. Thomas sent another. Victoria's holding back-to-back calls. She looks terrified. I should have felt triumphant, and part of me did. But another part recognized something deeper. Revenge had landed in my lap without me lifting a finger. I didn't have to plot or scheme. Harbor Point's downfall was simply the natural consequence of undervaluing the very people who had kept it alive. Still, the decision looming over me was heavy. North Bay's contract with Harbor Point. My team looked at me for guidance. The executives trusted my insight. And though I had chosen to speak with professionalism, the truth was undeniable. Harbor Point had built its empire on loyalty without reciprocity, and now it was crumbling. That evening, I sat at my desk with the city glowing beneath me and thought about how far I had come. 6 years of labor, of waiting, of hoping. All those sacrifices had led me here to a place where my worth wasn't just acknowledged, it was celebrated. And right here, let me pause to say this. If you've ever fought to prove yourself, if you've ever been dismissed by someone who should have supported you, don't give up. Share your journey with me in the comments, because these stories build community. And if you believe people deserve to be seen and valued, hit subscribe and join us here. This isn't just my story, it's ours. By Friday, the air in North Bay's office shifted. Decisions were being finalized, proposals compared. And though I officially recused myself from voting to avoid bias, I knew my presence alone carried weight. My knowledge of Harbor Point's weaknesses, my insight into Victoria's leadership, all of it informed the conversation. As I left the building that evening, briefcase in hand, I realized something startling. Harbor Point was no longer my burden. I had no obligation to save them. My only responsibility was to build here at North Bay, where my voice mattered. But still, I couldn't shake one thought. When the final decision came down, when Harbor Point received the news, Victoria would realize just how badly she had miscalculated. And the woman she had labeled disloyal would be the one guiding her company's most devastating loss. The decision arrived on a Wednesday morning, exactly 1 week after Victoria had looked me in the eye and declared me disloyal. I still remember the way my phone vibrated on my desk, a new email sliding across the screen. David had sent it first to me as a courtesy. Subject line: North Bay Marketing Partnership. I opened it slowly, almost savoring the moment. The message was brief, professional, and final. After reviewing proposals from competing agencies, North Bay Solutions had chosen to transition their business to Meridian Creative. Effective immediately, all materials to be transferred by end of day Friday. There it was, clean, precise, devastating. Harbor Point wasn't just losing an account. They were losing the account. Nearly 30% of their annual revenue evaporated in a single paragraph. And the most brutal part, the person overseeing the transition was me. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the skyline beyond the glass. The irony felt almost cinematic. I hadn't plotted this. I hadn't whispered a single word to sway anyone. Harbor Point's collapse wasn't born from sabotage, it was born from neglect. They had created the hole, and when I stepped out, the foundation crumbled. By noon, my phone buzzed again. Jessica's name lit up the screen. Chaos here. Emergency meetings all morning. Victoria looks pale. People are whispering that North Bay pulled out because of you. I typed back carefully, "Stay strong. Take care of yourself." An hour later, Thomas sent his own message. "She's furious. She keeps saying loyalty, 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 but no one's buying it anymore. People are scared." I didn't reply right away. I sat with their words, feeling the old instinct to rescue, to protect the colleagues I had left behind. But then I reminded myself Harbor Point was no longer mine to save. They had made their choice. They had called me disloyal, erased me, discarded me, and now the consequences were theirs alone. Later that afternoon, Jessica sent one final message. 3 more people handed in notice today. It's like the ground is shifting under everyone's feet. I closed my phone and looked around my new office. My team was working steadily, voices carrying across the open space. Papers shuffled, ideas sparked, energy flowed. It was a stark contrast to the panic unraveling across town. I thought back to the moment Victoria slid my ID badge across her desk and told me I was done. She believed she had cut me down, but the truth was she had cut herself. By discarding the one person keeping her biggest client tethered, she had signed Harbor Point's downfall. The beauty of it all was in its simplicity. I didn't have to scream or fight or prove her wrong. I just had to walk away. Success had done the work for me. That evening, I received a LinkedIn request from Jessica. I hesitated, then accepted. A message followed. "Karma works fast. Thank you for everything you did here. You deserved better." I typed back, "Wishing you the best. Stay strong." And I meant it. Because by then, I understood something crucial. Revenge doesn't always require blood or fire. Sometimes the most devastating revenge is simply thriving where others expected you to fall. Harbor Point had gambled that I was replaceable. North Bay had proven them wrong. And as I shut down my computer and gathered my things, I realized that my story with Harbor Point was finally over. The perfect revenge had already written itself, not through bitterness, but through proof. Proof that the woman they had underestimated was the very one holding their future in her hands. I stepped out of the building into the cool night air, the city alive with possibility. Behind me, Harbor Point was crumbling. Ahead of me, North Bay was growing. And at last I was free to choose where my story went next. Hatter. A year later, when I look back on everything, the memory no longer burns, it glows. What once felt like humiliation has transformed into one of the greatest gifts life has ever handed me. My mornings now begin in an office filled with light where my team greets me with respect instead of suspicion. We've built campaigns that have broken records, partnerships that have expanded beyond anything I thought possible, and each success carries with it a quiet reminder I was never the problem. The problem was a company that failed to see me. Sometimes over coffee, I catch myself remembering those nights at Harbor Point, the endless hours hunched over reports, the hollow promises of next year, the way Victoria's voice would drip with condescension when she said the word loyalty. Back then, I thought I was trapped. I thought I had no choice but to endure to prove myself over and over again. But being forced out taught me something far more valuable than any paycheck freedom. Freedom to walk away from places that diminish you. Freedom to refuse the chains of empty promises. Freedom to believe that your worth does not require permission from anyone else. And what about Harbor Point? I still hear whispers now and then. A client lost here, an employee gone there. Their reputation fractured after North Bay's departure. I don't feel the satisfaction I once thought I would. Instead, I feel distance like watching a storm fade into the horizon. That chapter belongs to the past, and I no longer need to stand in the rain. The real revenge was never about watching Victoria stumble. It was about stepping into a life where I didn't need her approval to succeed. It's funny, sometimes people ask me what I would tell my younger self, the girl who sat in that cubicle waiting for recognition that never came. And I think I'd tell her this: stop waiting, stop begging, stop believing that loyalty is noble when it only flows in one direction. You deserve more, and the world will show it to you if you're brave enough to leave. That's the lesson I carry now, the one I hope you'll carry too. If you've ever been in a place that couldn't see you, let this be your sign to take that step. And if you've ever found the courage to walk away, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Together we can remind each other that we're not alone in this. And if you want to continue exploring stories like mine, stories of betrayal, resilience, and transformation, make sure you subscribe. Because what comes next might be the story that shifts something in your own life. When I close my office door at the end of the day, now I don't carry a cardboard box filled with fragments of a wasted career. I carry pride. Pride in the battles I fought, the lessons I learned, and the freedom I claimed. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success, it's peace, it's the quiet certainty that you never needed them to begin with. And as I look ahead to everything still to come, I know this story isn't just mine. It belongs to anyone who has ever been underestimated, discarded, or silenced. We rise not in spite of those moments, but because of them. So as this chapter closes, let me leave you with an invitation. Join me in the next one. Because if you thought this ending was powerful, wait until you hear what happened next. Looking back now, I realize that what felt like devastation was actually transformation. The day I was fired, I thought my career had ended. I thought I had been stripped of everything I had worked for. But life has a way of using endings to create beginnings. And sometimes the harshest rejection is the very thing that sets us free. In the quiet of my new office, with the city stretched out before me, I often think about the journey that brought me here. 6 years of tireless effort, of fighting to prove my worth to people who never intended to see it. 6 years of loyalty repaid with excuses and denial. And then one decisive morning, the illusion shattered and I stepped into my power. What I carry with me now is not anger. It's not even triumph. It's clarity. I know what I will never again allow myself to accept silence in the face of dismissal promises, without action, loyalty, without reciprocity. The people who truly value you will never need to be convinced. They will show you in respect, in trust, in opportunity. If you are listening to this and find yourself in a place that diminishes you, I hope my story gives you courage. Courage to question, courage to act, courage to walk away if you must. Because sometimes freedom doesn't arrive gently, it arrives as a push out the door. And though that push may sting, it can also carry you farther than you ever imagined. This is not just the end of one chapter, it's the start of another. And perhaps if you've been waiting for a sign, let this be yours. You are worth more than staying small. Always remember sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply living the life they said you couldn't.